Hello and welcome back to Study History with Mr. P. In this video I'm going to look at the period 1700 to 1900 and the changing definitions of crime across that period. So there are a number of crimes we need to look at for this and a number of examples we can use to understand this with too. So first of all, smuggling. Smuggler gangs had operated on a larger scale and in a more organised way in this time period than in the 17th century. And in fact, in the 18th century, smuggling increased because more goods were taxed. Therefore, as a result, more people sought to try and get untaxed goods at a cheaper price. Many people, including the upper class, in fact, bought cut-price goods from smugglers, and so in turn they would then help to conceal the activities of smugglers. But then another change to smuggling comes at the end of this time period, when the amount of smuggling dropped after import duties were reduced, because as a result of reduced import duties, there was less difference between the prices of smuggled goods and the legally bought goods. Therefore, people were less inclined to buy illegal goods. A crime that developed during this time period was highway robbery. Highway robbery involved threatening or attacking travellers and forcing them to hand over valuable possessions. Now, it had existed since the Middle Ages, but it became more prevalent during this time period. And it became a more common crime in this period, because of increased trade meant more money was being moved around, and also roads were improved, and so more people were on the roads carrying valuable items with them. However, just as with smuggling, another change came when highway robbery decreased in the late 1700s and early 1800s after it was made a serious crime and therefore carried the death penalty. In addition, banks became more common, and so people were less in need of carrying large sums of money around, and on some roads there became mounted patrols, which again deterred crime. So what we see is this as an example of a crime that increases and then decreases during this time period. Poaching is another crime that continued to be widespread after the start of this period, 1700s, and the government continued to use laws to try to stop poaching. But people still saw it as a social crime, just as they had done in the medieval period. In fact, anti-poaching laws were made harsher in the 1700s. For example, in 1732, the Black Act was passed to try to stop poaching gangs by making it a capital offence, and therefore, as well as making it illegal to blacken your face in a hunting area. The idea being that if you were seen in a hunting area with a blackened face, the idea was you'd be up to no good, and therefore it could be a capital crime that you would therefore be punished for. Another change to crime in this time period comes over witchcraft. Now, in the medieval period, we looked at the rise of witchcraft and how, particularly in the 1600s, there were witch hunts and more people persecuted and put to death for the crime of witchcraft. But a new Witchcraft Act actually decriminalised witchcraft in 1736. People could therefore no longer receive harsh punishments for being a witch and were seen as nothing more than tricksters, which would carry a lesser punishment. I'm also going to end up with a short case study of the Tolpuddle Martyrs in 1834. Now, the Tolpuddle Martyrs provide us a good case study of how the law continues to protect the wealthy and their interests, or those with power and their interests. So it started when a farm labourer, George Lovelace, was arrested as he left work. Along with 5 others, he was accused of administering an illegal oath, and so breaking an old law that was originally put in place to stop sailor mutinies. Now, these men were arrested to stop their political activities, which were seen as a threat to government authority. And this is because the men had sworn an oath, a promise, that they would do what they could to protect their wages, and they formed a friendly society. So effectively, these men were protesting against their low wages. They were each sentenced to 7 years transportation, which was a very harsh punishment, and was meant to act as a deterrent to others that tried to form similar friendly societies or unions. But their case attracted mass protests, and a petition with over 200,000 was presented to Parliament, although it wasn't accepted. But the trade union supported families of the men, and after 4 years they were actually pardoned and released. However, each of these examples shows how changes to the law and people seeking to protect their interests defines which things become seen as crimes and serious crimes. And still during this time period, we actually see more crimes punishable by death. In 1688, for example, only 50 crimes were punishable by death. By 1765, 160 were, and in 1810, 222 were. And then, towards the end of this period, that number does actually start to reduce. And this is partly due to the idea of the New Order. People who, influential people and newly influential people who wanted to protect their interests, an increasing sense as well of the people with power wanting to protect their interests and therefore seeking to do so through the system of crime and punishment.